Following the election of President Trump, the Democratic Party has been trying to regain lost ground thanks to some new energy and some new challengers within the ranks. Among them is our guest, a video game developer, computer programmer, and survivor of gender conflict in the tech world. She's running in this year's Democratic primary for Congress in the 8th District, which includes downtown areas, South Boston, and part of Dorchester, along with many suburban communities. We'd like to welcome Brianna Wu.
Such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for being with us. So how did you make this transition, from game developer and warrior to candidate?
Absolutely. Something I found during Gamergate was asking the powers that be to do the right thing did not work. I had talks with the Obama administration about prosecuting some of the people that sent me and other women in the game industry very violent and explicit death threats, and they couldn't get it done. So the conclusion I came to is if we want to make some changes in this country, it's going to require some new blood in Congress.
Well, what does new blood mean exactly? Is this about different positions, or is this about doing some other things to change the chemistry?
I think it's a bit of both. Right now our House of Representatives, if I remember correctly, it's about 20% women, and I think that definitely has a consequence in the kind of bills that get passed. But I think it's also just having relevant life experience. Most people in Congress right now come from a legal background or a business background. I'm a software engineer. We have a very pragmatic solution to approaching problems. I think we need people like that in office. I think we need teachers. I think we need therapists. I think we need different kinds of people representing us.
Well, I imagine one thing you must be concerned about is cybersecurity, and a lot of viewers might be saying, well, no, that affects federal agencies. What does that got to do with you or me?
Oh my gosh, no, look at the Equifax breach. Like, you and I are both going to be paying for that for decades to come. This is a huge breach. So cybersecurity, this really affects every single person watching this broadcast today. Like, not just with identity theft, but as far as it being a national security issue, we could not be more vulnerable in this country. Like, we've seen the facts about Russia and the election coming out. We've got to have a serious discussion about shoring up our infrastructure and really hardening our vulnerabilities.
Of course, another issue that in a way you're related to is gun violence. Now, you only do it with maybe the game designs. Sure. You have strong women.
Yes, I do.
Most of the other games have strong men.
Yes.
But it's violence, isn't it?
Yes, it definitely is. We were talking before the show. I do think our industry is kind of stuck in a pattern. We're very good at putting out violent fantasies, but for me personally, I've played so many games at this point where you're a hero with a gun and you kill 1 million people and you beat the game. I think it's a real lack of innovation in our field, and I personally believe this is a consequence of not getting different kinds of people in senior positions in the game industry. Generally speaking, when people are creating game designs for a $100 million game, that's going to be men. When you're creating gameplay systems, that's going to be men. So I want to see us hire different kinds of people in our field, and I think a lot of these problems solve themselves.
Well, what about beyond the game world, the real world, the access to guns or any other kind of ways preventing the bad things from happening?
Sure.
What do you think needs to be done?
Well, it's very interesting. There's a man I was a good friend with. His name was Steptoe Tollhouse. He was the former head of enforcement at Xbox. As we were kind of creating these game systems that let all of us play online with each other, he was at Microsoft really trying to put systems in place to punish people that threatened to murder people they played games with, or harassed people, or doxed people. And he really didn't get the kind of institutional support that he needed at Microsoft to make those changes done. So something I would like to see us do is really address this toxic culture in the game industry. Now, I want to be really clear. If you're trying to say, our solution to gun violence is to censor video games, I can't get on board with that. But I do think it's true we have a culture problem in my field.
But what about access to guns, especially military-style rifles?
It's indefensible. I grew up in Mississippi. You hand me a Glock right now, I could field strip it with my eyes closed. But I think it's very clear that we don't need these weapons that are really made for no other reason than to kill massive numbers of people. something I think is here in Massachusetts, we have gun laws that are common sense, and it seems to work better than most states. If I want to go buy a handgun today here in our state, I have to go to my local police department and I have to take a training class on a Saturday. That is eminently reasonable, and we need to make those kinds of policies a federal policy.
This is BNN News, and we're talking with a candidate for U.S. Rep in the 8th District, Massachusetts, Brianna Wu. Brianna, the incumbent here is Stephen Lynch. I know he's not the most progressive member of the state's congressional delegation, but this isn't the most progressive district either. So how can you challenge him without maybe going too far to one side?
I do want to tell you, District 8, Stephen Lynch was elected right after 9/11. District 8 has a huge population of young people and people of color today. So what I find when I'm out there is I see a real thirst for true progressive politics. That's what I personally see on the ground. But I think you're right. If you're running for Congress, you have to represent everyone, not just women, not just Democrats. You have to represent Republicans too. One of the things that's so fun about running for office is you talk to so many people you never would if you weren't running for office. And I feel like it just makes you a better person hearing all those perspectives all day.
Well, one thing I've noticed about his voting and his ratings is that in more recent years, he's been getting higher ratings from groups like NARAL and Planned Parenthood. So I can imagine a lot of people, not just women, looking at that saying, well, I don't know, he isn't so bad maybe.
Yeah, I mean, so my view on that is I see Stephen Lynch, with all respect to my opponent, is more of an opportunist. He kind of spent a career fighting women's access to reproductive health care, but then when he's running for Senate, all of a sudden he's for it. I think there's a real difference in voting the party platform when it comes up and showing real leadership on issues. Taking the ball, making calls, getting legislation passed that helps women, that helps people of color, that helps LGBT people. So in my opinion, a lot of those positions I see are really more lip service than reality.
I'm also intrigued by something you said about, I guess, what you see as a flaw in many incumbents is an inability to speak to millennials in a way that seems genuine. What does that mean?
Well, I think if you look at, we have great representatives here in Massachusetts, some of the best in the nation. But I think if you were to look at their Twitter accounts, generally speaking, it's run through a press spokesperson, and they're not on there really talking to people in a way that feels genuine. If someone sends me a tweet, it's not, someone I hire talking to them, it's me. And I think what people want more and more is they want to feel authenticity from their leaders. They want to feel like they genuinely care. We're at BU today in the journalism department. The PR profession was grown out of this desire to limit information and to give press only a certain amount of information so they would be forced to publish that. I think in the information age, that model is just really, really outdated.
When I think of the cross-section of this district, I also see some of the old standards, a lot of veterans, a lot of police and firefighters.
Absolutely.
And I can say, what is she going to do for us?
I grew up
trades unions too.
No, I grew up in Mississippi. Do you know Mississippi had more people serving per capita in the military than any other state in America? Those were my friends that served in Iraq. So when we're talking about police not being able to get training or equipment, that offends me. When we're talking about veterans coming home and not having access to health care, that offends me. So I am absolutely on their side.
Thank you very much for being with us.
Yes.
Candidate for Congress in the 8th District in the Democratic primary, Brianna Wu.